San Diego. They call it America's finest city. But behind the sunshine and ocean views, there is a real story, one told through homes, neighborhoods, and the people building their lives here. A market that's always moving, always evolving, and never quite as simple as it looks from the outside. I'm Carlos Gonzalez. I've been serving this community for over 20 years, and this is the San Diego Real Estate Insider, where we break down what's really going on in this beautiful city and talk about all things San Diego real estate. Let's get into it. Hey, what's going on, everyone? I am Carlos Gonzalez. I am a real estate consultant here in San Diego. I've been doing it for about 20 years. I'm a guy that's passionate about real estate, passionate about building wealth. And welcome to the San Diego Real Estate Insider, where we talk about all things San Diego real estate related. So for this week, I have a plethora of topics that I want to touch on, but I really want to focus on a question that I get asked all the time. Very often, friends, family, past clients, just people that I know of, people that I meet during the week. A constant question that I get asked is, "Hey, Carlos, I want to build my real estate portfolio. What are some of the strategies that I should utilize? Hey, Carlos, I have a little bit of savings. I want to start generating some passive income. What are some strategies that I should take advantage of? What's out there? What are some investment vehicles as far as real estate goes? What are the best opportunities right now?" So I really want to take a deep dive into what the San Diego real estate investing picture currently, climate currently looks like. And so we're going to dive deep into this. I truly believe that investing in real estate is one of the best ways to build some passive wealth, but you have to do it the right way. You have to know what you're doing. Everyone, we're all in different scenarios. It's the tricky thing, or the interest. Let's just say the interesting thing about podcasts and influencers and people posting stuff on TikTok and social media and all that stuff is that if you go to a guy like Pace Morby, he's going to be all about buying sub two types of deals. If you go to a guy like Grant Cardone, like everyone has their own flavor and everyone swears by that flavor. And the reality is that we are all in a different scenario. We're all in different, our circumstances are completely different. So what works for a guy that wants to invest in wholesaling and subject twos might not work for a guy that just wants to do some very, very easy passive investing, or what works for a guy that has done 50 plus deals as far as investments go, doesn't work for someone that's just trying to start building their portfolio. So there's a lot to it. So you really, really have to partner up with an agent that really knows about this. And here I'm just going to give you some very high level overviews. You're going to be able to download everything um, through my website. And let's get started. Let's get started because my coffee is just starting to kick in. So it's perfect timing. All right. So you guys can see that. Let me minimize this. There we go. So today we're going to talk about the top real estate investing strategies here in San Diego. So before I do that, I'm going to give you guys a very general overview, if my screen allows. Here we go, of the San Diego real estate market. So, um, 5 strategies that I'm going to be focusing on. I mean, there's more, but for me, these are my usual suspects. Maybe for you, some of these are new. The buy and hold rentals, strategy number one. I love this one, an oldie but goodie, a classic. It's still one of my favorite ones. Short-term rentals, it's been changing. There's been a lot of adjustments on the short-term rental front. Multi-unit properties, I love this one too. This is a great one also. Let me do this. Turn off all notifications. Multi-units, I love that one. That's a great one. That's one of my top favorite ones, especially if you still don't own property, if you're trying to get your foot in the door as far as buying your first home, buying your first property. This is perfect, but I'll get into that more in detail in a little bit. Number four, house hacking. So house hacking, Jesus, I've been hearing that term so much lately. And to be honest, I didn't know what it was, till about a year ago. Hey, Carlos, I'm house hacking, and we're doing this and we're doing that. And house hacking, what is that? It sounds like this, like really sexy, cool kind of thing. But the reality that is that house hacking, I mean, we've been doing that. I mean, uh, now that I know what house hacking is, like people have been house hacking for eternity. It's just maybe we just didn't really have a name before. But so house hacking is a very, very popular one, and especially in some of the higher price markets, you see that a lot. And number five, um, the ADUs and junior ADUs, which is it's a huge it's making a lot of noise. It's been making a lot of noise here in San Diego for the past, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So those are the five that we're going to be focusing on. But I don't want to. Where's my mouse? There it is. But before I jump into those five strategies, I want to give you guys a very general overview of the San Diego real estate market. So right now we're looking at an average medium sales price of 900,000. This time last year we were at 875. So it's definitely appreciated as expected here in San Diego County, but the appreciation has been, very, very minimal. The medium household income here in San Diego County, you're looking at $108,077, $108,077, right? So this is your medium household, and your medium income here. And again, this is not per individual, this is per household. Months of supply, so months of inventory, we're still at a very aggressive seller's market by definition. So even though it doesn't feel like a seller's market, it feels more like a buyer's market. But by definition, because of the low inventory, we're still at a seller's market. But and the next box here, 40 days on the market, that's kind of what makes you say, wait a minute, but it doesn't feel like a seller's market because properties are sitting on the market for a while. I mean, 40 days on the market on average. It's very, very high for San Diego. That's typically San Diego, at least the past 10 years, it's been less than 30 days. So, we're definitely seeing that, right? We're definitely seeing and as a result of the current interest rate climate, as a result of the medium household income being so low in comparison to where you really need to be to become a homeowner, there all these things come into play. So San Diego is a tricky market as of right now. And you really have to know your options. You really have to know the details about, if you're trying to get into the investing side of things as far as real estate goes, you really need to know all the details if you go, route A, route B, route C. And so we're going to break some of those down. Here on the left side, I included some good information as far as cost of living. So San Diego ranks among the top 5% most expensive U.S. cities, right? So the local cost of living here is about 50% higher than the national average. So, and my wife and I, we see it all the time. We travel, we go out of town, and we grab a meal. Even in places like L.A., Newport, Laguna, is like, oh, it wasn't that bad, you know. So it's very real. The fact that San Diego is extremely expensive is very, very, very real. And again, the average household income, or in this case, the medium household income, is not really at par with the cost of living here in San Diego. So monthly needs for a single adult. So monthly needs for a single adult are going for about $4,500 a month. So hey, in order for me to break even as a single adult, I gotta cover, I gotta make sure that I have $4,500 in my checking account every month in order for me to be able to cover my expenses. Monthly needs for a family of four, it's a very different story. You're at about $9,500 a month, which I have a family of four. I can witness, this is exactly where we're at. So it is very, very real. Income needed to buy a home, you're looking at about $200,000. So you can see that there's a significant gap between the medium household income to the income needed in order for you to buy a home. So there is a big disconnect on that, and I think that's why um, we're seeing a slowdown here in the local market. Properties are sitting on the market a little bit longer. And then the low supply is a little bit tricky because you have a lot of move up sellers, right? That really can't do much on their properties because they're sitting on a 2-3% interest rate. So they're like, dang, if I sell this 2,700 square feet home and I move into a townhome that is 900 square feet, I'm going to pay more, even though I have some equity. I'm going to pay a lot more, or maybe not a lot more, but I'm going to pay more mortgage wise on the townhome as opposed to the my current big single family home. So that's the challenge that a lot of these people are facing, that they're kind of cornered because of the interest rate environment, because of the income economy environment. Really, we really haven't seen that much growth as far as jobs go here in San Diego um, uh, to really be so that we can really be in a situation where it's like, all right, now the medium household income is 200,000. Now that now pretty much everyone that's technically middle class on can buy a home. So it's very different, because there's still that significant gap. And what we're seeing is that we're having a lot of people that are moving to San Diego because they have remote jobs in places like Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, where it's just crazy expensive. And now they're moving to San Diego, they're working remote. So they have those big salaries, but they're not really part of the San Diego economy job wise, right? So, we're seeing some of that as well. So let's continue here. So, even though I'm maybe sounding like a negative Nancy, San Diego, you can say what you want, but San Diego is always going to be a premier investment market. Why? It's very often it's labeled as one of the best places to live in the U.S. It just got ranked number one as the most desirable city to live in per Zillow. um it's we have a great climate. It's funny because last week, so I come from a small town. I mean, it's not a small town. If the people from my childhood would hear this, they'd be like, it's not a small town, it's a city. So I come from a small city in the Mexican side of Imperial Valley. It's called Mexicali, and the weather, like right now, it's probably like 110 degrees, right? So I've always told my wife, like, I don't think I would mind, moving back home because I grew up in that weather. So last week we went to Palm Springs and it was like 97, 98 degrees. I was hating it. So we are really blessed here in San Diego with the climate. Now San Diego is very unique because it's almost like an island. To the west you have the Pacific Ocean, to the east you have the mountains, south you have Tijuana, and north you have Camp Pendleton, right? So it's really, um, it really operates as an island. So land is very limited. Hmm. So because of that, there's always going to be high demand for housing, whether it's rental or purchases, because we are not, and this has been an ongoing problem since the beginning of time here in San Diego, right? So San Diego is geographically constrained. Ocean to the west, mountains to the east, Mexico to the south. The city simply cannot sprawl infinitely. The physical scarcity means demand consistently outpaces supply, providing structural floor under property values that few other U.S. metro cities can claim. We have a big military and defense economy. We're home to the largest concentration of military assets in the world, including Naval Base San Diego, Camp Pendleton, MCAS, Miramar. The region enjoys a massive, stable employment base. Military families and defense contractors represent a consistent rental demand pipeline that insulates the market from typical economy cycles. We have the climate premium. San Diego's near perfect weather is not merely a lifestyle perk, it is a permanent economic driver. People relocate here specifically for the climate, sustaining migration inflows even during downturns. No heating bills, no hurricane risk, and year-round outdoor living continue to attract both residents and remote workers, which is what I was talking about earlier. We have a great university ecosystem. UCSD, USD, SDSU, my alma mater, a cluster of private colleges together enroll over 100,000 students, and this generates perpetual demand for rental housing near campus corridors, particularly in University City, La Jolla, Mission Valley, and North Park. Markets where vacancy is essentially zero, right? So we still have those drivers, those pillars here in San Diego that really drive the housing inventory. They really drive the demand um, primarily. So let's talk about strategy number one. This is, like I said, this is one of my favorite ones. The good old buy and hold. And the challenge that I see with investors trying to come into the real estate market here in San Diego that come from other areas is that they try and use the same cap rates that they use for other areas, and they try to pretty much whatever their guidelines are, they're trying to mirror them and funnel investment opportunities here in San Diego through those guidelines. The cap rate has to be 5%. This has to be that. This has to be this. This has to. And the problem is that the San Diego market is not, Columbus, Ohio. It's not Toledo, Ohio. It's not Dearborn, Michigan. It's not Midland, Texas. It's a very, very different animal, right? And so and in today's high interest rate ecosystem, in order for your cash flow to make sense, you're going to have to put a substantial down payment in order for you to kind of be at that point where you can, make a little bit of a gain or maybe even break even, right? So, buy and hold real estate is the practice of purchasing a residential property and renting it to long-term tenants. Typically on 12-month leases, the investor benefits from three simultaneous income streams: the monthly cash flow from rent, the mortgage paid down by the tenant, equity build, and long term property appreciation. In San Diego, appreciation alone has historically averaged 5 to 7% annually over rolling 20-year periods, consistently outperforming national averages. So I sold a property here in San Diego years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, to a family that moved to Texas, and then they recently sold that property. So they used their equity to buy a property in Texas, put a big, chunky down payment, and they just sold that property. And they had been living on it for 3 to 4 years, maybe 4 years. So they just sold it for less than what their purchase price was 4 years ago. Why? Because some markets you really don't see any appreciation, and here in San Diego, we are uh, beyond blessed just by being able to see that 5 to 7% appreciation, which during COVID years, I mean, it was, practically at least double that. Why this works, why buy and hold works in San Diego. Like I said earlier, we have a strong tenant demand. The population grows faster than housing supplies permitted. Like I said earlier, we've been dealing with a significant housing shortage for a while. Rent growth. San Diego rents have increased an average of 4 to 6% annually over the past decade. Tenant protection are manageable compared to other cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. So this is still a landlord friendly environment, but it's because we're in California. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. Because we're in California, we're very, very heavy on the tenant protection side of things. We have Section 8, vouchers that provide guaranteed government backed rent payments. So those are great. I sold a 4 unit complex in National City 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and all Section 8 tenants, and people were, almost like physically fighting to get that property because they wanted to make sure that, those tenants were golden nuggets for them, right? And then we have military relocation orders that keep the vacancies low. So soldiers must move on schedule. Departure and arrival are therefore predictable. So as far as San Diego is a big county wise. It's a big, it's a big county. Uh, some of my favorite zones, neighborhoods, communities where buy and hold, where I would recommend, if you're looking into doing a buy and hold strategy, I would really focus on Chula Vista. And I know that it's my home turf. I know that I've been living here for ages, but it really compared to comparing apples to apples, compared to the rest of the county, it really gives you the most for your buck. Number one, you still have some newer homes, from built from 2000 and till 2023, 2024. Some newer-ish homes built within the past 20 years, and there's a lot of parks. There's a lot of there's a lot of everything. It's a great planned community. It's 5 zip codes, so it's very extensive. But you have some great schools down here. And if you compare a home in Otay Ranch to that same home in Scripps Ranch or in Carmel Valley, it's still significantly cheaper to be here in San Diego. So here in Altai Ranch, a 2,500 square foot home, you can probably buy for $1.1 million. In Scripps Ranch or Rancho Bernardo or Carmel Valley, you're scratching the 2 million, so you can still get a lot. It's a great community. We have a lot of military families down here. The schools are great. The public educational system are great. It's great. There's tons of parks. There's tons of shopping. So it's a very well planned type of a community. And I'm specifically talking about East Chula Vista, east of the 805, right? West is developing, and there's a lot of cool opportunities on West Chula Vista. So don't sleep on that. But I'm primarily talking about the east side of Chula Vista. Another one of my favorite communities, if you're looking into buying and holding, is downtown. I know this can be a little bit controversial because downtown has been, unfortunately, in a decay for the past, I don't know, since the pandemic, for the past 6 years. So in the pandemic, people that lived in downtown, businesses shut down. You can pretty much leave your house. Uh, so people fled downtown. Why? Because now kids were being homeschooled. You were working from home, so all of a sudden, the space where you were just kind of like just using to just decompress and just hang out with your family, now it became your entire ecosystem. So people were leaving downtown in flocks. And then what happened is that then right around that same time, because of a combination of so many different factors, we can do an entire episode about this. The homelessness population skyrocketed in downtown, right? So now you had businesses that were closed, the streets were getting flooded with homeless folks, and downtown San Diego hasn't really recovered since. You walk through the Gaslamp Quarter. I hadn't been there in years, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's not. I personally lived in downtown for many years. I mean, 3 or 4 years. So I love downtown, but the reality is that it's been declining for several years. Which, on the flip side of that, it's a great opportunity for an investor to really grab, snatch some property, two-bedroom units that you would see at 800,000. Now, you put a search for, stuff less than 700,000, and properties pop up left and right. Why? Because properties are sitting on the market, and it's a tough market to sell, especially with all the political situation going around. Um, that's making the downtown living experience very different. I had a guy that I sold his downtown unit 4 or 5 years ago, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm out of here, man. It's I can't even walk my dog outside. It's zombie land." So it's unfortunate, but that's a reality. So because it's sort of a declining market, I think it's a great opportunity because I'm 100% sure that downtown is going to bounce back up. I mean, if you look at downtown San Diego, I mean, there's not a whole lot of places like that in the U.S. And it's a beautiful location. The different neighborhoods, districts within downtown are awesome. I lived in Cortez Hill, but you have Little Italy, you have the Marina District. You have so many things that really, like I said, make downtown very unique, a very, very unique place here in the U.S. So I think downtown is going to bounce back in the next few years, and it's going to bounce back harder than ever. And when that happens, watch out, because you're gonna see some appreciation. There's a lot of activity in the downtown area as far as trying to bring different industries into that community. I think they just built an Equinox gym and a bunch of things. I think they're getting a Javier's. So there is a lot of money coming into downtown to make sure that it bounces back up ASAP. But a lot of it has to do with cleaning it up also, right? I took my wife there for dinner maybe about a year ago, and we were having dinner at this restaurant. It used to be a really popular restaurant, and it was just my wife and I. And I mean, it was probably just a handful of tables. So at first I was like, man, how can they afford to keep the lights on? I mean, there's just like four of us here. And then outside on the street, just, people, homeless folks with mental illnesses, drug abuse, all that kind of thing. So, but I am a firm believer again that downtown is going to bounce back. Strategy number two, short-term rentals. Short-term rentals were, the hottest thing since sliced bread, maybe 8, 10 years ago. And people are still really, really into the short-term rentals, and they're great. And they're great vehicles for not just for the short-term rental income, but for other things like depreciation and things like that. But and the attractive thing about a short-term rental when they first started was that, let's say that you could rent a property for $3,000 a month if you have a long-term tenant in there. If you set it up as a short-term rental, you could probably get that within a week. So what started happening is that people just started buying properties left and right all over San Diego and just using them as short-term rentals. There's a lot of short-term rentals here in Chula Vista that maybe several years ago it was nice, but I think the short-term rental situation here locally, it's at a point where there's too many of them. So because there's too many of them, it doesn't really, there's just an oversupply of short-term rentals. So what you want to do with short-term rentals is really keep them really have your short-term rental near the touristy areas, right? So near Mission Beach, near the SeaWorld's there, or all the beaches are there, that's why people vacation here in San Diego. They want to be close to the zoo and all those different attractions, and people were buying short-term rentals in the middle of nowhere, and then what's happening? Well, it's not getting rented. I have a buddy of mine, and he showed me he owns like 4 or 5 short-term rentals, and he showed me we're hanging out about a week or two ago. He showed me his short-term rental, his Airbnb app, and he's like, "Look, man, there's nothing here. It's no scheduling, no nothing. Why? Because you really have to be more strategic when it comes to short-term rentals. The two things that I'm seeing that are keeping short-term rentals at high demands are, number one, location. You have to be relatively close. I'll say within a 10, maybe 15-minute drive to the local attractions, right? So if here in San Diego you want to buy a short-term rental, I wouldn't be looking in Mira Mesa or El Cajon, Escondido. Well, maybe Escondido, but for different reasons. But I wouldn't be looking in certain communities. I wouldn't be looking in Chula Vista, right? Because it's not really close to the touristy stuff. It's 30 minutes from the beach, so you really have to take all those things into account. So I think for many years people were just like, all right, whatever, it's a cheap property. I can buy it. I can short-term rental it, and I can make some income off of it. But the reality is that has drastically changed, right? So location number one, and then number two, I think the short-term rentals that are pretty consistent on getting bookings are short-term rentals that offer an experience. Like I just had a client in Temecula. He took he bought a property on at the top of a hill, and he made it just for entertainment purposes. Like you can, even though it's just here in Temecula, um, which is still cool because you have wine country right down the street, so that's a huge location plus. But then on top of that, if you don't want to leave the property, if you just want to stay at the property for the entire weekend, that's perfectly fine because it has so many things. He put like a mini golf course. He put an infinity pool. There's a bunch of activities that you can do there. So those experience connected activities, and experience connected short-term rentals, those are great. And I think those are, when you're looking at demand for short-term rentals, those are always going to be in high demands, right? So what has changed? Well, the city of San Diego now limits short-term rental licenses. The coastal areas faced additional restrictions from the California Coastal Commission. Airbnb inventory has ballooned. Properties are sitting vacant for weeks at a time. HOAs are more aggressive, especially because back when this whole short-term rental thing started, people that were renting homes were subleasing them so that they could get short-term rental income out of it. So even though you were not the owner, you were the less leasee. So that was happening a lot. I think it still happens in a way. And then, of course, we have the high interest rate environment. The short-term rentals are not dead. The short-term rental strategy is not dead, but the era of easy short-term rental profits in San Diego, I believe it's over. The market has corrected, regulation has caught up, and the golden window 2016 to 2021 has closed. For investors entering today, the execution bar is far higher. You need a property in a short-term rental permitted zone, a management strategy too, and the stomach for seasonal income swings. And here's the other thing about short-term rentals: it's not a passive investment. Uh, buy and holds, single family homes. You get a long-term tenant. You get a long-term tenant in a condo in downtown. Uh, you buy a multi-unit property, 2, 3, 4 units. Those are, passive income sources. Short-term rentals are going to keep you very, very, very busy. So, keep that in mind. Right. So, this allows me to segue into strategy number three, multi-unit properties. I love this one, especially if you're trying to get your foot in the door, be a homeowner. I think this is right now, 2026. This is the strategy. You can still qualify FHA. With minimal down payment, you get a duplex. You live in one unit, and the other unit helps you offset the mortgage payment. And at the same time, you're growing equity, and you're now in the home ownership game. You have equity in your advantage. To your advantage, you're able to do some additional write-offs when it comes to interest rates and interest payments and things like that. So multi-unit is great. It's one of my favorite options out there. The multi-unit properties under a single roof represent the ideal intersection of cash flow, economies of scale, and manageable complexity. When one tenant vacates, the other continues paying rent, your income doesn't drop to zero. So, for example, that's, if you're renting both units, or let's say that it's a triplex and you live in one of the units and you rent the other two, your income doesn't drop to zero. The partial vacancy resilience is fundamentally different from single family rentals, where one vacancy equals 100% vacancy. So, you have, with owning a single family home and having that one tenant, you have all your eggs in one basket. With a multi-unit property, let's say that it's a triplex or a fourplex, you have three, and let's say that you live in one of the units, you have two people paying rent, you have three people paying rent, one vacates, it's not the end of the world. You're not, going into your savings account and pulling money out. So, I also included a sort of a real cost breakdown of what some of those expenses look like. I do love multi-unit properties on the expenses side also, because I think it works, especially if you have a single building. So multi-unit properties offer stronger financial leverage. 2 to 4 unit properties still qualify for conventional residential financing, FHA, VA conventional, with down payments as low as 3.5%, 5%. Unlike 5+ unit commercial properties, It's a different ballgame. It allows for faster portfolio growth. Buying a four unit property is the equivalent to acquiring four rentals under one single transaction, right? So it allows for that growth. One appraisal, one title search, one close, easy peasy. So compare that to buying four separate single family homes with four times the transaction cost and the time, right? Um, some of the best neighborhoods to do this is again Chula Vista, Logan Heights, Barrio Logan, National City. These are all communities with a high volume of multi-unit properties. So those are some of my favorite ones. Risk distribution. Even at 50% occupancy on a four unit, you're still generating meaningful income. The same occupancy on a single family rental means zero, right? So multi-unit is structurally more durable. Um, Number four, my new favorite word, house hacking. So what house hacking is essentially like, let's say that you buy a two-story home. Let's say on the first story you have a bedroom, you have the kitchen, living room area, all that stuff, and then upstairs you have two, three bedrooms and a loft area. So what a lot of these investors are doing is they're splitting the house into pretty much two units, or they're buying a let's say a 4 or 5 bedroom home. They're living in one of the bedrooms, and then they're renting the other four. That concept has been around for ages, but it just didn't really have a name, or maybe it did have a name, but not as sexy as house hacking, right? So you have, and buying multi-unit properties by default can also be considered house hacking in a way. So the two main models are the room rental model and the floor split vertical division, right? Which we see those a lot. And I guess building a junior ADU would also fall under the house hacking part of it. So house hacking is the same thing, right? You buy a home, uh, and the reason I much rather prefer a multi-unit purchase as opposed to house hacking is that with house hacking, you buy the home, you close on the property, and then you have to spend the money to split the property, right? And get permits and do all that stuff. So um, it requires more upfront cash from your end as opposed to when you buy a multi-unit property. If it already has some tenants in place, that's it, right? So it does require some cash upfront. Um, the same thing with ADUs. So ADUs, I think, are great for those folks that really want to generate some cash flow, that really it's like, hey, I have my primary residence. Right now, I don't really have that many options that I want to tackle or that I'm able to tackle as far as growing my real estate portfolio. But what I can do is I can pull a home equity line of credit from the bank, and um, I can go ahead and build an ADU in the back. I can go ahead and build a junior ADU in the garage. And that allows for some cash flow to happen, which is great, right? And so, for those of you who are not familiar, and I'm going to do a full episode on just ADUs, but what is an ADU? An ADU or accessory dwelling unit is a secondary residential unit on a single family lot. It's a detached cottage or the casita, or as we say in Mexico, la casa de la suegra, your mother-in-law's house, a converted garage, or a basement apartment. A junior ADU is a smaller unit up to 500 square feet, typically the garage, carved from the existing home, typically from a bedroom with a separate entrance, or the most common one that I see is the garage conversion. California's 2020 ADU laws dramatically streamlined permitting, and cities like San Diego saw a surge because of the low supply of inventory, because of the high demand for housing. Um, Cities like San Diego pretty much significantly dropped a lot of these restrictions around building permits and getting permits for ADUs, and pretty much said, all right, everyone that owns a single family home lot, you can pretty much get an ADU, at least, I think at least one in some cases, depending on the city. I think here in Chula Vista, you can get, depending on the lot size, you can get at least two. So some of the pros, it gives you that additional rental income. It increases the property value. Multi-generational housing flexibility. So I just had a client do this where they built an ADU on the side of their house. They live in a cul-de-sac and they have a big, big lot, and they built a two-story ADU. It's a one, two, three bedroom. Yeah, it's three bedrooms upstairs, and their daughter and her husband live there with their kids, right? So it allows for that multi-generational housing flexibility. Um, no dedicated parking requirement near transit hubs. So for you as the investor, you don't really have to spend that extra money on, you know, uh, building parking lots, additional sidewalks, and everything that comes uh, along with adding parking on communities where the property is close to public transportation. So you don't have to, that additional expense, you don't have to worry about that. Junior ADUs can cost on a national level. I think these numbers are more national, 30 to 60K. I think here in San Diego, you're more like 60 to 80K. The garage conversions. And as the owner, you can also qualify for construction loans. Now, some of the challenges, construction costs, again, here in San Diego, they're going to be high, especially for the ADU that you're building it completely, you're building the entire structure in the back. They're going to be on the higher side. The permit timelines, sometimes those are lengthy, just just because it's San Diego. The crowding effect, that's a big one for me. It turns a residential lot into a mini neighborhood. So let's say that, my family and I, we're looking to go buy our first home, right? And we're going to go to, I don't know, Rancho Del Rey, 91910. And we're looking at around, we're looking at the community, and then the house that we like, we really like that house. But the houses around that, they have ADUs, and so there's 50 cars in the driveway, no parking on the street. It just gets very crowded, because again, that's why I really like the multi-unit property strategy, because multi-unit properties are already built to handle, two, three, four different tenants. Turning a single family lot into an ADU zone, per se, it can really um, change the dynamics of the microdynamics of the neighborhood. Mm. So for a lot of buyers, that's not attractive, right? It's like, um, even buying the ADU. I mean, at this point, I would just say, all right, this is more of an investment type of property than if it's a home with an ADU in the back and a junior ADU in the garage. I would say, hey, this is more of an investment property as opposed to, somewhere where we could move into. So it even makes me shift my perception. Sorry. So here's my frank assessment. I'm not a big fan of ADUs, and here's why. California's ADU incentives have been oversold as a universal solution. The no parking waiver for properties near public transit sounds great on paper, but most San Diego families own cars, at least two, and removing that parking doesn't make the crowding problem disappear. It just makes it so that it's now your tenant's problem, right? It's the people that live there, and if you are the one that owns that lives in the main house, it's also going to be your problem. The bigger issue is that a lot of homes in San Diego simply don't have the physical footprint to add a livable legal ADU without making the property feel crowded. A 600 square feet ADU in a 5,000 square feet backyard is very different from one in a 3,500 square feet lot with a pool. The math works in theory, but the reality on the ground is often a very, very different story. Junior ADUs are more sensible, lower cost, simpler permitting, and you're working within the existing structure already. So if you already own a four-bedroom home and don't use the fourth bedroom, or you keep the garage as storage, the ADU conversion can generate you some substantial rent, with really relatively low disruption, right? So my advice is evaluate the ADUs case by case. Don't buy a property specifically for an ADU play unless you've confirmed feasibility with a contractor and review the permit path. For most investors, the capital is better deployed into a multi-unit property with existing structures, right? Because then it gets difficult to rent some of these ADUs because the space is so funky in many cases, right? So here is a side-by-side comparison of the different strategies, and then I rate them. By the way, all this is available to you. You can download it. Just send me a message, and I'll be happy to send this over your way. So, entry costs. I really, house hacking and the multi-unit, or even the buy and hold. But really, this for me, this is the moneymaker right here, buying multi-unit property to get started, right? Maybe you already own a few multi-unit properties, and now you're buying single-family home lots, and you're putting a multiple ADUs in there. Like I said, it's a different strategy for everyone. We're all in a different situation. Some key principles here. We're all in a very different situation, so we really have to sit down, analyze your goals, see what it is that you want to achieve, see what you have available, see what your situation currently looks like, and then take it from there. There's a lot of folks that say, oh, ADUs is the way to go. No, that's not true. Oh, multi-unit property is the way to go. No, that's not true. Oh, house hacking is the way to go. Oh, no. The reality is that, every option is a good path, but it just really, really depends on your particular situation. Guys, it was great jumping on this call. Again, Carlos Gonzalez, Realty of America. Feel free to reach out to me. Let's start building some wealth together. If you have any questions, if you want to jump on a quick strategy call, send me a message. My phone is right here, 858-432-3792, 858-432-3792. I'd love to connect, and let me know if this is something that you found valuable. All right. See you guys next time.